We hear it all the time, right? Words have power. But what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, today we're going to see how a few specific words didn't just shape an argument. They literally shaped the ground beneath a community's feet.
So let me ask you this right up front. How can a couple of carefully chosen words, or, a few carelessly thrown ones, completely change the future of a neighborhood? That question is really the heart of the story we're exploring today.
Because we're going to unpack this whole idea through a story. It's a story about a garden, a community that was totally divided, and just 12 specific words that defined every single obstacle and every victory along the way.
All right, so every great idea has to start somewhere. But as we're about to see, even the best ideas run into some serious headwinds right from the get-go. And that's where our story begins.
Okay, so this is Alara. She had this wonderful vision. She wanted to turn a totally neglected hillside into a garden for everyone. But there was a big problem, a physical one. The spot was on a slope where heavy rains would just gush down and undermine the very soil she needed to plant in. And what's so interesting here is how these two words perfectly capture the challenge. To gush is to flow out suddenly, forcefully, and to undermine means to weaken something from below, bit by bit. That gushing water was literally undermining the foundation of her entire project. But believe it or not, the rain wasn't her biggest problem. Enter Mr. Vance. He was a local official, and he seemed dead set on stopping this project. And his weapons? They weren't bulldozers. They were words. He would publicly disparage Alara's idea. He'd admonish anyone who dared to support her. And any time he got cornered with a direct question, he would equivocate. And you can see his whole strategy right here. It wasn't just one thing. No way. It was a combination of tactics. Disparagement to make the whole idea sound silly, admonishment to scare people away, and equivocation to create confusion. It was a triple threat of verbal obstruction. So let's just break these down, because together they are a really potent mix. To disparage is to belittle something, make it seem worthless. To equivocate is to use vague language so you never have to give a straight answer. And to admonish is to warn people, but gently, just enough to make them second-guess themselves. When you use them all together, you don't just state your opposition, you build a wall of doubt. But here's the thing about a wall. It's only an obstacle if you let it be. For Alara, this was the moment the tide started to turn. It was time to fight words with action. Alara realized that two things were absolutely essential for the project's survival. First, she had to personally withstand this storm of criticism coming from Mr. Vance. And second, she knew she couldn't do it alone. She had to rally her neighbors and make this a real community effort. And to withstand isn't just about passively surviving, It's about actively resisting and enduring. It's about taking those hits, like all that criticism, and not letting them break you. It is a word that screams strength and resilience. Withstanding all that pressure gave her the breathing room she needed to do the next crucial thing, to rally. To rally is to bring people together for a cause. It's the complete opposite of being isolated. It's about creating strength in numbers. So how'd she do it? She started to harness all that untapped energy in her community. And this wasn't just about gathering a crowd. It was a really smart three-step process. She found local experts, she organized people into volunteer teams, and she created a real plan based on actual data, not just good intentions. And that word, harness, is just perfect, isn't it? It means to control something powerful and put it to good use, like harnessing the power of a river, or in this case, the power of a community. She turned disorganized goodwill into focused action. So, with a harnessed community behind her, Alara was no longer just defending an idea. Oh no, she was now building a foundation for its future, and for the community itself. And this brings us to this fantastic contrast. The whole conflict really boiled down to a battle between two words. Mr. Vance's goal was to undermine the project, to weaken it with doubt. But Alara's goal was to underpin it, to make it stronger with facts, expertise, and collaboration. Right. To underpin literally means to provide a solid foundation for something. So while Vance was busy trying to chip away at the project's base, Alara and the community were down there building a much stronger one, reinforced with hard data and teamwork. And the results went way beyond just a pretty garden.
Their engineering work actually helped mitigate the very real danger of landslides from all that gushing water. And for the younger volunteers, the whole process started to inculcate this deep sense of ownership and community pride. And here we can really see these words come to life. To mitigate is to make a bad situation less severe, and in this case, their work literally mitigated the flood risks. And to inculcate means to instill an idea through repetition and teaching. For those young volunteers, every day they spent working in the soil inculcated a love for their environment. So what was the end result of this whole battle of words and wills? Well, it was a complete transformation, not just of a hillside, but of an entire community. And this just brings our story full circle beautifully. Look how our vocabulary words now describe success. The garden mitigated the environmental risks. Its terraces could withstand the worst storms. And now the neighbors gush with excitement over the flowers. And Alara? She doesn't just have an idea anymore, she now wields real influence. To wield is to hold and use power effectively. Through her persistence and her ability to rally people, Alara went from being the target of criticism to a respected leader who could make real, positive change happen. You know, in the end, this quote from our source materials says it all. The project worked because its foundation was solid. It was underpinned by the trust and communication Alara built in her community. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. Forget about gardens for a second. Think about your own work, your community, your projects. What foundations in your world are you ready to underpin?